Welcome to Aboriginal Head Start on Reserve second callout for land-based capital outdoor early learning play spaces at FNHA Head Start Sites webinar. We are recording this webinar, this live webinar, to include those whom couldn't join us this afternoon. So feel free to enter any questions you may have in the Q&A questions box, and we will be monitoring this area and we will respond towards the end of the presentation. Before we begin, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that all of us are zooming in from different parts of the province, and just if you could take a moment to acknowledge the individual territory in which you are zooming in from. This is the First Nations Health Authority Head Start team who developed this webinar. At the end of the presentation, you will find the contact information for each FNHA Regional Head Start Advisor. Your Regional Head Start Advisor is here to support you and your community as you proceed through this. We will hear from each of us during this webinar. We are happy to announce a second call out for the new funding opportunity for our Aboriginal Head Start, our ASOR funded and collaborative communities. The Ministry of Children and Family Development, MCFD, has funded FNHA $9.1 million to administer this funding, up to a maximum of $100,000 per eligible community. This second call out is a short-term, one-time only capital funding opportunity, and it's aimed at boosting local economies. Head Start programs have the ability to adapt and shift their delivery models based on community needs. We know there are many benefits to being outdoors rather than indoors. These capital land-based projects will be undertaken and completed during a pandemic. Communities applying for this funding must be willing and able to complete these projects under these conditions. The ASOR land-based capital project will help provide funding to create, enhance, and/or refurbish outdoor early learning and play spaces at Head Start communities. This project fosters greater opportunities for physical activities and outdoor land-based early learning and recreation at Head Start communities. The deadline to apply for the second call-out is Friday, April 9th, 2021. Approved communities will have until March 31st, 2022 to complete their projects. I'd like to hand this over to Lori. Oh, I think you're on mute, Lori. There we go.
Yes. Communities Connections to Land-Based Learning webinar. Communities can prepare for this capital funding opportunity and increase the success of your application by watching the First Nations Health Authority webinar exploring your program. Connections to Land-Based Learning. Prior to completing the application, this webinar will assist you to understand the benefits of land-based learning, explore the importance of land-based learning during these unprecedented times. Learn tools and strategies to incorporate the land-based learning into your Head Start program. To view this webinar, please visit our webpage. Okay, capital funding timeline of activities. Webinar March 1st, 2021. Applications to follow. Application is due before Friday, April 9th at 4 p.m. Late applicants will not be accepted. Applications will be reviewed and internally processed by April to May and approved by Senior Executive. Funding and new community agreements will be in place by June 2021. Communities will be required to submit quarterly status reports. All projects must be completed by March 22nd, 2022 under current pandemic conditions. Communities must agree to provide quarterly project updates and/or reporting as requested by First Nations Health Authority in order to be eligible for project capital funding. All communities need to be in good standing with First Nations Health Authority, reporting and accountability to be eligible for project capital funding. All communities need to be in good standing with First Nations Health Authority reporting and accountability to be eligible to qualify to receive this funding. I'm waiting for the next slide. Okay. Terms and definitions. AHSOR, Aboriginal Head Start on Reserve. AHSOR, collaborative communities, when there are two or more First Nation to First Nations community partnerships. BCR, Band Council Resolution, a written resolution or authorizing document of Chief and Council adopted at duly convened meeting of the elected council for the First Nation. If you have another governance model, please submit your equivalents to demonstrate the governance awareness support of this application. Example, board resolution. Health Funding Agreement. First Nations Health Authority is agreement between First Nations Health Authority and the recipient regarding the delivery of health programs and services and includes all schedules, program plan where applicable, and funding adjustment letters and any amendments made in accordance with terms and conditions. Provincial licensing officers. Provincial licensing officers governs the provision and the care of supervision and licensed care facilities governed under Community Care and Assisted Living Act. Example, licensed child care or licensed after school care. Unlicensed care, those who provide outreach programs for the parents responsible for their own children, or unlicensed child care facilities may only care for two children not related to the provider and are not monitored or inspected by the government of BC. Service agreement, or SA, a formal agreement between a service provider and a client that articulates the terms and conditions of the particular service relationship. The service agreement helps outline the expectation of both parties before the work actually begins. I'd like to hand this now over to Lynn.
Thank you, Laurie. So the next piece here is we're moving into the application. So the application has 5 sections. The purpose of section 1 is for you to provide us with an overview of your community and program along with your contact information. It has a total of 12 questions. The purpose of section 2 is the section of the application where you tell us why you need the money. Why you could develop or enhance your program with this funding. It has a total of 2 questions. The purpose of section 3, in this section, we're requiring you to demonstrate all of your planning in the areas of design, construction, maintenance, and all of the partners you will collaborate with during this project. This section has 3 questions. The purpose of section 4, in this section, you're going to want to spend additional time to itemize each of your projects, to break them down, and to describe your community project plans. So you may use the attachments, you may use attachments in this section, which could include a budget for each project. It's a breakdown. It's to give us an example of what we would be seeing through this. The purpose of section 5, this section has 2 questions and it also has a checklist. The first half of this document is the introduction and the application, while the second half of this document is a sample application for you to review. Please note that each of the communities is able to apply for this funding on their own, and it doesn't need to be through a community that receives ASOR funding. If you're unsure about your agreement type or if you're collaborative, etc., just contact your advisor and they can let you know. So we're now going to discuss each section in detail and review the community application. For the purpose of this webinar and user guide, we've created a fictitious community to demonstrate how to do this application. So section 1 is community information. So what we want is your community and program name and the contact information. We may need to be in touch with you to follow up if we have any other questions to help us understand your application. So if the primary contact's not available, we're asking that you list up to 2 other contacts who are knowledgeable about the application and provide us with the additional information if we would further need some. Question 5, we ask for the ASOR contribution agreement number. To find this agreement number, you can ask your finance office, the health or the education director. We also have access to that information, so if in doubt, please just let us know. Question 6, we ask if you have a service agreement with another First Nation community to provide Head Start on reserve services. So that would mean that you are part of a collaborative service agreement. So then you would need to list the First Nation community that you partner with. Question 9, if you have applied for the first round of this capital funding in January, you will note that we have added this question. If this is your first time applying for this capital funding, you would mark yes in that box. If you have applied for this funding in January, you would mark no. If you have any additional questions, we will address them in the frequently asked questions section of this webinar. Please note that every community who receives Head Start on reserve funding, either directly or through a FNHA health funding agreement or through a collaborative service, to provide Head Start services in your community, you're eligible to apply. So if you were under a collaborative service agreement and there were 3 communities, each of those communities would be able to apply. Please let us know if you're collaborative communities so that you can apply for this funding on your own and separate from your partnering your First Nations community that you're involved with. If you're unsure about what type of agreement you have, you can contact your funding agreement advisor or else the Head Start advisor in your own region. Please note that every community who receives Head Start on reserve funding, either directly through FNHA or through a collaborative service, you're eligible to apply. And I've just repeated myself because I read the same thing twice. So slide 9 is community need, and that's in section 2. So in this section, we ask for how many children will benefit from this funding. So we need you to tell us the total number of children in the community that are from age 0 to 6, and also the children from 7 to 12, sorry, that will benefit indirectly and directly from this enhancement, this outdoor land-based learning. For example, what age groups will benefit from this project? Would there be other age groups from the community that may also benefit, such as before and after school program, a K-4 program, a band school program? Another question in this section asks you to describe your current community outdoor early learning play space. What are your needs and how your community will directly benefit from this funding? In your answer on number 14, which is where it asks those questions to describe your current community outdoor early learning space, that's also a section that you can attach pictures and measurements of your current play space and the areas for development and what that would look like. So it just gives us a much better picture when we're looking at the application, that we're able to understand what your request is. So here are some possible scenarios. We would like to expand our land-based space and have a culture yard for our children. The area we would like to develop is an open space with no fencing. The yard we want to fence is 100 by 120 feet. So with a statement like that, we're much able, it equips us to be able to really understand what your request is in the community. Here's a couple more of scenarios. We would like to fence an area around our proposed expanded garden boxes for our medicine and community garden to keep the deer away. We would like to add 5 newly built garden beds that are 4 feet by 10 feet. We currently don't have any storage, and we will require a new storage unit 8 feet by 8 feet to store our new outdoor equipment. Currently, we have 20 community families with young children that'll benefit directly from these scenarios. In order to operate a land-based program, we need a program set of outerwear for the children and staff for the winter and spring conditions, as we will be outside 4 hours every day in all weather conditions. So this is not a capital ask, but there are definitely ways that, you can receive funding to assist with that. A hand washing station is required to ensure proper health and hygiene for our children and staff. We plan to have a knowledge holders, culture, language, medicine, attend our programs weekly to enrich the children, the staff, and the family's knowledge about our culture, land and protocols as we enjoy our new culture yard. All of our community members are welcome to use this space. This new land-based space will include and enhance all of the Head Start 6 components. So these are the type of things that you would like to put in your application to help us understand your vision. So I'd like now to hand it over to Ada.
Awesome, thanks, Lynn. So in this, we're covering section 3, community readiness. In this particular section, we asked you to describe your strategy on who will be responsible for all the operations and administration of this project. For example, managing the contractors, adhering to the deadlines, purchasing, submitting quarterly reports on time. For example, when you review the sample application, you will note some examples of what this may look like. Please note, we also have you describe your community collaborative partnership that may be involved in this project. For example, various or other departments within the band, youth groups, summer camps, band schools, language nests, language programs. Having your knowledge and language keepers involved, your youth, skilled trades, families, land and resources, etc., fisheries. We also require a band council resolution, other known as a BCR, in support of these projects. If you have another governance model, please submit your equivalents, a board resolution, for example. All applications must submit a BCR or equivalent prior to Friday, April 9th, 2021 at 4 p.m. We require you to describe how the band and council will support this project, making it successful. So making sure you've got it all filled out. And just reminding you again, all project must be completed by March 31st, 2022. So now we're in section 4, the community project plan. This is really important. We really want to have a look at, if you're really great at describing what this will look like. This is where you will describe how each project item will create or enhance and or rehabilitate outdoor early learning and play space in your Head Start site. Your community plan must demonstrate how you will ensure that all aspects of the design, construction, and maintenance of these projects are subcontracted to qualified professionals, which means people or persons possessing the professional standing, knowledge, training, or experience necessary to complete the tasks, such as carpenters, electricians, plumbers, etc., etc. And we all want these structures to meet or exceed provincial standards for safety and quality. Please note, selected projects for licensed programs are approved by your provincial licensing officer. Please include documentation of your licensing's approval with your plan. Selected projects for non-licensed programs are approved by FNHA. Consulting with your regional Head Start advisor is also required. Here is a sample of the community project plan. This community has a total of 4 items listed within their project plan. Please note that your budget will need to demonstrate and break down each item for each project. We will take a closer look at this in a moment. So in question 18, you will need to describe and demonstrate the following for each project. The project item, timeline, and description. You will need to identify whether this project is a new build, replacement, or refurbishment. You will need to describe what equipment and or materials prep for the surfacing or for the site preparations are also required to complete this project item. Describe whether or not this item has special considerations. For example, cultural considerations, protocol, environmental, community safety, etc., etc. You will need to attach a minimum of 2 quotes and additional budget or pictures. Pictures are fabulous. Take pictures. This is an area that we noticed a theme in the first go around of funding in January. Please note that we are requesting that you clearly label each file so we can distinguish the files communities have sent to avoid missing pieces of your application. We receive a lot of files with applications, so please make sure they're properly identified. Here's a sample of image of what an outdoor cedar covered overhang could look like. As you can see, this area enhances the ability to stay dry or provide shade and lighting for those darker days. Here we are. Now we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at the community project plan along with their budget. This is their first project item, 1, which is, and the name is the chain link fence, 100 by 120 feet, 6 feet in height. Their timeline for this project, item 1, will be completed by June 30th, 2021. They've identified this project as a new build by selecting the drop box in this application. We describe what equipment and or materials such as fencing, posts, surveying, and surfacing site preparations needed. Fence, post pounder, concrete delivery. We will hire a fencing contractor to survey and install the fencing. They will work with our facilities manager to ensure that the fence is surveyed and installed appropriately. They will work together to ensure the timelines of this install work together. Here are a few samples of images of how this community would like to install a chain link fence. So they create the cultural yard and explore the forest and the water area surrounding. Now I'd like to hand it over to Tara.
Thank you, Ada. So here we have section 4, the community project plan. So this is project item number 2, garden boxes. So here you can see the budget is labeled project number 2. We've identified that the costs associated with the materials. So we've broken down each of the items. The purchase of soil at $150 and the delivery is $50. The non-treated lumber is $500, while the plastic would be $50. We have indicated there are many other items that might be miscellaneous. For example, the items for $50. We indicated that the labor would be $50 times the 16 hours of labor. Here you can see project number 2 has a subtotal of $1,600. Please note that this subtotal would be added at the end as we have a total project of 5 items. Here you can also see an example of the image of what that would look like. We're going to take a look at the next one, which is project number 3. This is a storage unit. You can see some sample images here. Again, you can take a look at the timeline for the project, the description, as well as indicating that it's a new build. You can see here that in this section under equipment and materials needed to complete this project, you'd see items such as the storage unit, concrete slabs, or shipping of the unit. They also indicated here that the facilities manager would oversee, purchase, and arrange for the storage unit to be delivered and installed. Again, we will work together to ensure the timeline will work with their center. Want to just acknowledge that, like Ada had shared, to clearly label your documents. So this helps us to understand which project item matches with which project. You can see here project 3, the storage unit, the budget that's identified. You can see that the materials or site prep, concrete base, and treated lumber has been clearly identified at $500. The labor and installation, this would be included, so that total is $2,000. And then the other is the 8x8 storage unit for $800. Again, identifying a subtotal there. In our next slide, we're talking a little bit about what has been identified as a hand washing station. So you can see 2 sample images here. The timeline for this project has been identified. They've also spoken to this being a new build, so the hand washing station. The equipment needed here would be concrete slab and delivery. Again, taking a closer look at the surfacing and site preparation, would be ordering, preparing the site, and the installation. The facilities manager would oversee, purchase, and arrange for the hand washing station to be delivered and installed. Again, identifying that we will work together to ensure the timeline of this will work with the center. Here you'll see a sample budget for project 4, hand washing station. There isn't any materials identified or labor or installation. Rather, it's showing the purchase of a unit, which is $2,500. Again, taking a closer look at that subtotal. I'd like to now hand it over to Denise.
Thank you, Tara. So you'll see we have 4 projects, and this is a summary of those 4 sample projects. So we've added the subtotal for each of those projects, bringing the grand total of our request to $17,400. I just want to say that these are only a few examples of what you can apply for, and some other ideas could include a child-sized mini smokehouse, a mini longhouse, a mini clan house, a child-sized pit house or teepees, kukulis, or child-sized canoes. Your plan might include a fire pit or outdoor underground cooking pit, picnic tables, or covered areas for your meeting place. You might also be envisioning creating a cultural yard with a pathway to a theater for storytelling and distance seating as another idea. And in your dream, you may see signage for the cultural yard, such as name places, cultural teachings in your language. So what projects would you need to create in order to make your dream a reality? This list of examples is meant to inspire you to dream about what your community desires and what that will look like. Your plan will be reflective of what fits best for your community. We've included a budget template in Word for you to use in the application. And if you feel more comfortable using an Excel spreadsheet for your budget, that's okay too. The important thing is to remember to include a budget, whether that be in Word or in Excel, in order for your application to be considered complete. I'd now like to hand it over to Ada.
Oops. Thanks, Denise. So this is a reminder that this funding is for land-based outdoor capital projects. Please note, licensed programs need to consult with their licensing officer to ensure that your project meets licensing standards. Please include any documentation or communication you have with your licensing officer in your plan. If you are unlicensed program, FNHA will approve your projects. Consulting with your regional Head Start advisor is required to ensure standards are met. So here we go again. I just repeated that. It was really important. So section 5, community acknowledgement. In this section, we will ask you if you are in good standing with FNHA reporting and accountability. This is really important. And this is where you need to acknowledge that you have consulted and collaborated with all the necessary decision makers and involved parties and are able to meet all of your funding requirements. And that you complete all projects on time, and that your nation, band, or treaty are responsible for any overrun costs. Here, you may also state that your community agrees that you will not exceed the allocation funding and will meet project deadlines. This application must be submitted to our email address at hcyd@fnha.ca, or can be faxed. Yep, I said faxed at 1-604-666-3864. This has to be before Friday, April 9th, 2021 at 4 p.m. Applications submitted after the deadline will not be accepted. Again, that's Friday, April 9th, 2021 at 4. We have also included a checklist to support the steps of your application process. For example, please review Exploring Your Program, Connections to Land-Based Learning webinar. Review the second call out for webinar for land-based capital outdoor early learning play spaces at FNHA Head Start Sites webinar. That's what we're doing right now. Making sure that you've got a completed application. All questions must be answered. Incomplete applications will not be considered. So make sure you've got all of them answered. Attached your community plan. Make sure your budget's included. Make sure you've got those quotes in place, and make sure you're using proper file names. Please refer to the budget template. Projects consulted and approved for licensed programs are approved by your provincial licensing officer. Submit a signed BCR or equivalent. For example, a board resolution before or by Friday, April 9th, 2021 at 4 p.m. We've also provided this awesome list of eligible capital items and ineligible capital items. This is a new section based upon what we learned from the first round of capital funding. Here is a list of examples for eligible and ineligible items. For example, eligible items are permanent structures and need to be secured, whereas ineligible items are operational or non-permanent structure replacement items, program supplies, and maintenance equipment. For example, portable items such as an art table. Now I'd like to hand it over to Lori.
Reporting. Communities must agree to provide quarterly project updates and reporting on each application project as requested by First Nations Health Authority. In order to be eligible for project funding, all communities have to be in good standing with First Nations Health Authority, reporting and accountable to be eligible to qualify for this funding. As we always say, we strongly encourage you to collaborate and work closely with your leadership, such as your ASOR manager, health director, education director, along with finance office when completing this application and the reporting. The regional Head Start advisors provide support to all levels of community pertaining to operations of Head Start program. They provide an advanced level of specialized expert First Nations communities in strategic and operational budget and reporting on ASOR programs and or any other initiatives. The types of support we offer include provide guidance and of the application and budget, assisted community and partner conversations as requested guide reporting requirements. We know communities may experience changes from year to year. For example, there may be staff changes or ASOR moves from health department to education department. Staying connected and working and collaborating takes time, patience, and consistency. As we know, many hands make light work. I would like to now hand this over to Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Now we are going to go over some frequently asked questions. So the first one is, can we apply twice if we have multiple program sites? If a community has multiple sites, then the community can apply for each site. However, the community's total cannot exceed $100,000. Please indicate clearly which project belongs to each site. So if you did have a split community, for example, and you wanted a cultural yard in one and a play space in the second part of the community, that would be absolutely great to be able to do that. Just the total for both of those projects can't exceed $100,000. I'm having problems filling out my application. Who can help me? We encourage all communities to first watch the webinar on how to fill out the application. And for inspiration, we encourage you to watch the Exploring Your Program, Connections to Land-Based Learning, which was held on October 28th. Your regional Head Start advisor can also assist you. We certainly have seen wonderful, wonderful ideas of what came through in the applications for the first round, and it's been truly inspiring. So anytime you want to collect with your advisor, we've certainly seen and heard of a lot of terrific ideas that perhaps you'd want to entertain for your own area. Where do I submit my completion application? Your completed application form and the accompanying documents should be sent to hcyd@fnha.ca, or if you don't have access to the internet, you can fax your application to 604-666-3867. Ideally, sending the application through to HCYD is desirable, as when you do fax, we did have some come in this time when there was no other alternative, but it's very difficult to see pictures and to really get a full grasp of what you're looking for in your community. So, but I know with internet connections and all the rest of it, sometimes there's just no other way other than to fax it. And absolutely that's acceptable. It's just we have a much better view if we get it through email. All applications must be received before 4 p.m. on Friday, April 29th, 2021, and late applications cannot be accepted. Slide 21. So here is some additional questions. Can I attach additional partnership details and/or project items on a separate page if I run out of room on the application form? Absolutely, you can definitely do that. Add in as much detail as you like to give FNHA the best information possible to assess your request. So when you attach quotes, additional documents, and/or pictures to your application form, make sure that they're labeled correctly, and they should be labeled as you see on the screen. So we just want to make sure that the applications are absolutely complete and that all of the documents are going into the right file. Okay, the next question is, I'm not sure what kinds of project items I can choose from. So you are free to choose capital items that you think would enhance your outdoor learning spaces. Some of the examples could be fencing for a cultural yard. Definitely fencing is a safety issue for the children in more remote areas. So that's something that you might want to look at. A covered lit outdoor area, a smokehouse, cuculis, outer storage sheds, hand washing stations, structures for raised beds for a medicine garden. Greenhouses are really popular. Creating shade spaces in a natural learning space. This is funding for land-based outdoor capital projects only. So if there's other items that you wanted to include, please look at the Appendix 5 for eligible and ineligible capital items. And I'm now going to hand it over to Tara.
Thank you, Lynn. I know we've had a bit of a juggle there in some of our slides. Just wanted to recognize that we're just continuing on a few questions here. We have a partially completed project, but need more funds. Can we still apply? So this must be a new project. FNHA will not reimburse projects that were previously funded or have started prior to May 1st, 2021. Can we reapply for the second call out for land-based capital outdoor project? The first priority will focus on funding communities applying for the land-based capital outdoor project for the first time. If funds remain, the second priority will be for successful completed applications from the second call out who also applied for the first call out. Maximum funding for any community, single or multiple sites, is $100,000 for both first and second call out. What's the difference between the first call and the second call for the land-based capital outdoor project funding? We've applied lessons learned from the first call to the second call and clarified what is eligible for capital funding and what qualifies as operational funding. You will please take a look at Appendix 5 for more information, such as eligible and ineligible capital items list. The criteria for both funding opportunities are the same. And slide 23 is, can I still apply if my Head Start reports are incomplete? Head Start reporting must be up to date for your community's application to be eligible. If you're not in good standing with your reports, please submit your outstanding reports prior to closing the application date. Are additional costs such as barge transportation or heavy equipment covered? Yes, it's all related to the cost for the capital projects and should be listed in your budget. Does the outdoor space have to be attached to the Head Start facility? No. However, the space needs to be easily accessible for all children. Please communicate the transportation plan if the new outdoor space is away from the Head Start facility. What does being in good standing with FNHA Head Start on Reserve mean? Being in good standing means your community is up to date with your narrative and financial reporting and submitted to FNHA. Please connect with your director and the Regional Funding Arrangements Advisor to confirm your status. If you have further questions about this, you can also reach out to your Head Start advisor. What is the difference between capital and operational funding? Please take a look at the Appendix 5 at the list that's eligible and ineligible capital items list. If I'm having a problem sending all the attachments required for my application to be complete, how can I make this easier? You can send multiple emails to the HCYD email address with your properly labeled attachments. Make sure to clearly identify in each of the email subject lines your community name and part 1. For example, part 1, community name, part 2 would say community name, part 3, and so on. There is also a free online service called WeTransfer. It allows you to email multiple documents up to 2 gigabytes in total size all at once. You can choose to create a free account or send your documentation as a one-time guest. The email address, the website address for this is clearly labeled on the screen, www.wetransfer.com. We're now going to take a closer look at the Q&A box, the question and answer box, to respond to some of your questions. I'm going to now hand it over to Denise.
Thanks, Tara. Okay, we've had some questions in the Q&A box that have been answered already, and we also have some that have not. So probably the most common, well, first of all, I also wanted to say a question in the chat box was, can I get a copy of this presentation? And the answer is yes. This recorded webinar and the slide deck will be available on our website as soon as we can get that process up and loaded. So that will be available for you. The other questions that are very common were, if we applied in round 1, can we apply in round 2? There were several questions like that. And that question was just answered by Tara. And the other theme that's happening of the questions are, So we already applied. Do we need to reapply? No, you don't need to reapply. I guess the other question that's being asked a lot is, how do we know and when will we be notified if we applied in the first round? So we expect that communities who applied in the first round will be notified by the end of this month. But I think that if people applied for the ineligible items list, then you can have a look at that, and those things have been removed, which actually is another question. It says, why was outerwear removed and non-eligible? So this morning, or just before this webinar, your Head Start advisor emailed you out a couple of announcements. And one of the announcements was to register for this webinar. Another one was an announcement from MCFD for land-based quality improvement grants. So this announcement was letting you know that we have been funded $3.25 million for the purpose of land-based operations funding. So this funding can cover things like weather-resistant gear, pandemic safety, facilitating land-based education, facilitating other cultural safety and relevant learning, maintenance like gardening tools and those kinds of things, and play and inclusive equipment. So that's what you can use this funding for. And in this announcement, we also let you know what the reporting deadline is, that these funds have to be spent for the operations grant by June 30th, 2021, and that the report has to be returned to us by July 30th so that we could supply MCFD with our final report. And also, if you have any questions about this, you can specifically talk to your regional Head Start advisor. So if you applied, I'll just circle back to if I applied for round one. If you were in good standing, then your chances of your application being funded was great. And if you applied for things that are on the ineligible list, then you could probably sort of reduce your land-based or outerwear from the land-based capital funding. So that way we keep the capital with the capital, and then the operations with the operations. So you don't have to apply for and tell us what you want to do for the operations grant. And so I hope that answered the question for people who are wanting to know why that was removed. The outerwear was removed because you were now receiving operational grant funding to apply for that on your own. And then another question that we had, I'm just going to open up the chat box. And there was a good question about the licensing officer. So it says, our licensing officer stated she was instructed by Northern Health not to provide support letters at this time. We are a licensed program and always need to include our licensing officer in all aspects and changes to our programs. We would require her as part of our project if we receive funding. What do we do if she cannot give a statement of support? Great question. So I just wanted to say that if you could include like email documentation that you have informed your licensing officer as part of your application, then that would cover you. The main thing is, I would just say that many of our quotes, I know that we're all under pandemic situations, and some of the quotes have had to be very creative and out of the box too. And so people have showed the email communication. They've taken pictures of the site, and then based on that site, if a community was on lockdown, they had somebody provide a quote based on that. Okay, let me just see, what else have we got? Yeah, several people asking the same question about how do we know? Yeah. If you have multiple projects that we would like to apply for, new playground equipment, a cultural garden, sunshades, over existing place areas, would that be one application or 3 separate applications? Understanding that the total is under 100,000. So it's going to be one application, but it's going to be listed as 3 projects. So you'll list the 3 projects for that one application, just as we had in this example. We had 4 projects, and so we had 4 subtotal budgets, and then we had a grand total budget totaling all of the projects together for the grand total. Can part of our application be approved but not the whole amount? Yes, that's actually what happened in the first call out. So we had people apply for several projects, and if outerwear was one of their projects, then we did not approve that as part of the project. Or if they asked for gardening tools, then we did not approve that in their project. Okay. All right. So if we applied for call out 1 and still waiting till the end of the month to know, are we just resubmitting that same package for the second call out in case that call out for the first package is denied? So what I can say is we approved all of the successful applications that included the quotes, had the BCR, had the budgets, and were for capital items. Those were approved. The ones that we did not approve were for the operations, or their reports were not up to date. So what I would say, let's just give an example here. Say somebody applied for $70,000 in the first application, and it didn't include any of the operations, but that was totally what they wanted to do for a capital project. They could apply for the second round for $30,000 for another project. So they could do that. Oh, and that's just what the next one said. If I submitted an application in the first round and was not successful, would that transfer to the second call out? So if you applied in the first one and the reason that the application was not successful was that the reports are outstanding, then you would definitely have until April 9th to submit your reports for that to happen. And in fact, what we did was those few communities that had cases like that, we just moved them automatically to the second round application. All right, let's look at the chat box and see. Yes, so I just want to clarify for anybody who has a collective and oversees other community fundings, each of those communities that you support can apply on their own up to $100,000 on their own as well. So I hope, Lisa, that answers your question. Okay, I think that's it of all the questions. Let's just double check to see if there's any other questions. Yes, we certainly acknowledge that outerwear is the most important part for a successful outdoor land-based program. And when MCFD came to us and said that we have some money and we'd like to keep the operations separate from the capital, we thought that would be much needed for the communities to be able to spend that money on their own. So now if they purchase, still it needs to be a community program-based outerwear set, whether that be a set for the spring, a set for the winter, so that they can make sure that their growing kids have outerwear. So if you have license for 12 kids, then it's not unreasonable for you to buy a set of 15 to 16 just to have those few extra sizes in between as your kids grow, or to have an extra set for the staff if a sub comes in. So that they don't actually belong to the children or the staff, that they belong to the center. So yes, we believe that the outerwear is definitely part. So do we need to, we already applied in January, do we need to reapply? It really depends on, you know what you applied for, so you know what, if there are still projects that your community could benefit from, then you're certainly welcome to apply for the second round based on, like I gave the example, if you applied for 70,000 and none of your projects required outerwear, then you could apply for 30,000. I guess I'll give another example of, if you applied for 70,000 in round one and you had $5,000 in outerwear, then you're most likely going to be approved for $65,000. So yes, you could apply for $35,000 with the projects for round two. I hope that answers those questions, and we gave enough examples of what that could look like. So everybody who was emailed was because they had a Head Start program. It didn't mean that you were successful or unsuccessful in the first round. So yeah, I'm just looking to see if there are any other questions. I would invite any of the advisors, if there's a question that I've missed in the checkbox. Oh, I did notice, you know, I think we said that the applications are due on Friday, April 9th throughout this. The first call out was due on Friday, January 29th. So I think in one of the comments it might have said the 29th of April, but it's actually April 9th. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, we just got another question here. Are people came from ocean going ancestors? Would applying for a boat and motor to take children and their families to harvest traditional foods, would that be approved? And then the other question is there a limit for operations funding that each community can apply for? Okay, so I just wanted to clarify, the operational funding, you're not applying for that. And it is based on the number of funded spaces that your contract, your funding service agreement has, your funding agreement, how many your spaces that you're funded for. And we also factored in the rural remoteness calculation that FNHA has. So people don't need to apply for operational funding. Krista, I would invite you to contact your Head Start advisors and just to talk through that a little bit more. So we don't, FNHA does not fund for vans. So I just need to explore a little bit more about that if a boat and motor would apply. Okay, she says thank you. So she's listening. Yes, so I hope that that was clear that the operational funding, people are not applying for that. It will show up, and that was the announcement that you also received to say what you could apply for that. Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Tara. Tara, did you want to say something?
Thanks, Denise. I just wanted to acknowledge the Fraser Salish communities that are a part of a collaborative. If you have further questions about what we've shared via email or in this webinar, to please reach out to me, Tara McLaughlin, your Head Start advisor, and I can further facilitate questions, support, and so forth that you might have outside of this live webinar. Thank you.
Excellent. So we're coming to the end of our time, and so I just would like to thank all of you for bringing such great questions. Thank you for bringing yourselves, and I know it was relatively short notice, so please spread the word and people can apply for round 2 and you can share what you learned today. So have a great day and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you for joining us.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Moon.